Welcome back. As in back. Michelle, welcome back to your own channel. It's been a little while. You know why? I was sick. That's what I'll say, instead of the fact that this book literally put me into a reading slump. I have had a hard time, okay? All right, so we're talking about Fire and Blood today, and we're doing something a little different, okay? So this kind of video is new for me. I haven't done this kind of thing before, but it's not new in general. This has been done many times. Specifically, videos I love, a couple of videos I love that have been done like this. Carrie Can Read did a great series on this, and of course, Mike's Mike has done quite a few of this type of video analysis with some wall action. Also, I don't have a color printer, so well, what do you want me to do? Go to the library and pay 45 cents a page? No thanks. I just wrote everyone's names in my handwriting, okay? No pics. But then again, this is a book. Do we need pics? Do we? Let's get this out of the way in the beginning. This is a great video for people who don't know anything about Game of Thrones. I say that because I'm one of those people. I don't know anything about Game of Thrones. However, I have some friends that are really good big fans, and they talked me into watching House of Dragon because it's like short and, you know, I wouldn't say fun, but it's like easily digestible, and it was only 10 episodes, and it's like you don't have to know any background information before starting it. So I went ahead and watched that. I was pretty interested in it. Heard that it was, you know, obviously from a book, and I was like, you know what, I'll read the book because I knew that the book continued on longer than the show. And why not get myself some spoilers, right? So the book is supposedly 736 pages. The audiobook is 26 hours. I did the audiobook, and boy, it was long. Disclaimer also for people who've read Game of Thrones and really liked it and are thinking that they'd like to read this book. This book is totally different. This is written from a historian's perspective, and it's very like overarching. It doesn't focus on any one character. There's no protagonists, no antagonists, no heroines or anything, no villains really. The historian who wrote this is like totally unbiased, and it's really written like a history book. No one survives the length of the book. It's very long. Like there's nobody who's alive at the beginning who's alive at the end. It's 100 and something years. So like all the characters that are alive, like they all die. Pretty much the only people that are alive at the end of the book are people who were born around 50-ish%. No one in this book is alive in Game of Thrones. Chances are if you had a bias in the House of the Dragon show, they will no longer be your bias after reading this book. There were multiple instances of pretty important things that were speculated on, and or the historian or the writer would be like, this person said this and this person said that, and we don't really know what happened, which is annoying. I mean, I know that's like real, but it was annoying. Like, I want to know what really happened. A show really could not exist with this writing. And I'll talk more about that at the very, very end. I might split this into two videos, so that might end up being at the end of the second video, but I will talk about, you know, this is, yeah, like I said, it's like, it's pretty much just the facts, bam, bam, bam. There's no emotions or anything that goes into anything. So the narrator does jump around sometimes, like generations, and then it'll be like, oh wait, let me go back. And it's like, please don't do that. I was already confused because everybody has the same name. And also, House of the Dragon starts about 50% of the way through Fire and Blood. So you're reading for a long time before you get to that. And the series of the events of the first season are done in about 8% or something of the book. So the book spans roughly 140 years. It starts earlier than that, but it really starts, it gets going at 0. The year 0 and goes from there about 140-ish years. So you can look up family trees for all of this online, obviously. I'll pretty much just be making a family tree, but I'm going to be explaining some of the background as well. Also, 26 hours. So I will be simplifying a lot, okay? If I took out your most favoritist part, sorry. All right? Sorry, it had to go. I used a lot of, what was that? Grade Saver to help out with this synopsis summary, because I simply can't remember every single thing that happened in order, okay? I really tried, but I can't remember everything. So the book starts with Archmaester Galdane of the Citadel of Old Town. He is the one who's writing this book, okay? It starts with Aegon's conquest, but it goes back in time a little bit more to give us some of the context, more context of the Targaryen family. So the Targaryens were one of 40 different dragon rider families who were like in pursuit of power in Valyria. Valyria was a land. If you've watched Game of Thrones, you probably know what this is. But Valyria was like just a city. But I was always kind of under the impression, even like when watching the show and even reading some of the book, that like Valyria was not a city. It was like heaven, kind of. And the Targaryens and other Valyrian families were like kind of like angel-y because they had, because they had dragons. I don't know. Whatever. It was a city. And the city fell in something called the Doom of Valyria. And the Targaryens happened to get out of Valyria before that happened, so everybody there died. They happened to get out of Valyria before that happened because Aenar Targaryen, he took his family away from Valyria before the Doom because his daughter, Denise the Dreamer, foresaw that it was going to happen. He took them to Dragonstone. So they just hung out there for 100 years or so to chill. We don't really know what happened during that time. And then Aegon the Conqueror, he's born in 27 BC. BC is not before Christ. BC is before the conquering. Well, they weren't kings or anything yet. Okay, so they were like living in Westeros. And they're just like a family that has dragons, keeping to themselves. Okay, so let's start the family tree. We have Aegon, and I have his little crown on there. Reason for that is that he becomes king. He's not king yet. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. Simply put, Aegon is flying his dragon around. And by the way, he flies an incredibly ginormous dragon. Balerion. He's like the size of 3 blue whales or something. Ridiculous. He's gigantic, okay? He's flying his little dragon around and he's thinking, what beautiful 7 kingdoms there are here. Wouldn't it be nice if all 7 of these kingdoms were united? And wouldn't it be nice, ideally, if I was the king of all of them? So he just gets started on it. So it was the way of things to marry your siblings back in the day, of course, and they continued that on for a long time. They loved doing that. He was married to 2 of his sisters. 2. Visenya and Rhaenys. By the way, the color of this tape means nothing. I'll probably run out and have to use a different color at some point, I'm just telling you. Okay, so Visenya, Rhaenys, and Aegon. Washi tape. So, like I said, siblings. Married. So one day, King of the Stormlands, which is one of the 7 kingdoms, Argilac Durandon says, hey Aegon, why don't you marry my daughter? And Aegon is like, who needs strangers' daughters when I have sisters? He says no, he already has 2 wives, he doesn't need another one. But he says, why doesn't she marry my friend, Orys Baratheon? Durandon is offended by this because he thinks Baratheon is of low birth, and he's shook. He's like, why would you even say that? Then Aegon is like, okay, so well, why don't I just meet with my dudes for a little bit? And then he meets with his dudes for like a week, and then he says, actually, I'm actually king of this whole realm. So eat that. Anyway, that's how the war started. Pretty weird, pretty simple. He just said, like, I want to be king of all of this place. And they said, really? And he said, yeah. And then they started fighting. And he starts the war in Blackwater Rush, which is where he makes his home base. He gets crowned in Valyrian steel and named king by, would you believe it, his own sisters. Yeah. So he goes to the Riverlands, and I mean, I'm not gonna lie, he and his sisters, they're pretty cool. Okay, really, they're pretty cool. He goes to the Riverlands. There's this crazy king named Harrenhal. Harrenhal, who lives in Harrenhal. And Aegon is like, give it up to me, man. And Harrenhal is like, no. And good luck with your dragons, because my entire castle is made out of stone. And Aegon was like, okay. And then he burns it to a crispy, crispy crisp. I mean, you remember how big his dragon is? Really, seriously, okay? So, Harrenhal dies in the fire. And then over here, different place, Orys Baratheon and Rhaenys fight with Argilac Durrandon, and they kill him. So they get that area too. Then Rhaenys goes to Dorne, and there's nobody there. Shocker. She talks to the queen, and the lady, I don't even know if she's a queen, whatever, the leader lady, Miriam Martell, and Miriam Martell is like, we're not going to fight you guys, we're also not going to bow to you guys. And that was kind of that for that time. Moving on, Aegon goes to the Reach and captures that region and kills the Gardner family that was ruling there and puts the Tyrell family into power instead. Don't ask me why. Then the Lannisters surrender, and then Torrhen Stark, who is leader of the Northern Territory, bows to Aegon without a fight. And Aegon is crowned again in Old Town after he gets the support of the Hightower family, which is pretty much just like the Richie Riches from Old Town. And he makes the main base in King's Landing. And he starts on the Iron Throne, which is made of the swords of his enemies. So he's king everywhere except for Dorne. And everything's going fine, but it's not going so well because he really wants Dorne. So Rhaenys goes back to Dorne and is actually killed on her dragon, Meraxes. Meraxes gets killed, she gets killed. Dragon riders are quaking. Okay, dead. Alright. Aegon is like, excuse me. So he goes to war with Dorne. They literally fight for 10 years. But in the end, everything works out for him because he gets Dorne and everything's pretty much peaceful after that. He dies like of old age or something. So this is the dies of old age sign. It's a coffin. Gone. But he has kids already, so things are okay for him. His son, a niece, he has with Rhaenys. She had a niece, okay? But everything kind of works out. He becomes king, Aenys becomes king, and moral of the story is he's not a great king, okay? He's spoiled, he only likes music, doesn't care about politics. There are a lot of rebellions and he doesn't really do much. He just wants everyone to like him and get along. So, the backstory is they have this religion that's like kind of similar to Catholicism maybe, and there's one area that doesn't follow it and they like follow the old gods, and his council's like, you need to get them to do the real religion. And he's like, oh, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Anyway, so it becomes a big thing. It causes a lot of conflict. And then anyway, he dies. Okay, so he just like dies. He was king for a while, things weren't great, and then he dies. And I don't remember if he was killed or not, so I'm just going to put the regular one because I don't know if he was killed. But he's dead. But it worked out because Rhaenys and Visenya are both equally Targaryen, right? So actually, it's like, great, there's another sister who we can have be, whose kids can be king. Isn't that so great? That's not really how it works, though, because Aenys is king, so shouldn't his kids be king? But anyway, Maegor doesn't care about that. So this is Maegor. When his half-brother died, he's like, okay, that's a 3/4 brother. Let's be honest, that's a 3/4 brother. He said, I'm actually going to be king now. Everyone's like, wait a minute, because Aenys had a kid. Would you believe what his name was? Maegor says, I'm king, actually. So Maegor fights Aegon. Anyway, Aegon's supposed to be king. Maegor says, I'm king. So they fight on Dragonback, and actually Maegor kills Aegon. Would you believe it? You like that? Does that look good? So Aegon was never king. Even though he was in the line, he was never king. So things aren't looking good for the Targaryens, and if you kill each other, it's like not great. You're not supposed to kill. So he's known as the Kinslayer. And that was like kind of a curse on him a little bit, seems to be. He was crazy, had 6 wives, but he finishes King's Landing, and the part that he made, he calls the Red Keep, which comes up later. He calls it that because it's red. Okay. He kills a lot of people. Everyone kind of stops rooting for him. He's not great. Plus, things were going pretty bad already when he became king, and they just didn't get better. He dies on the Iron Throne, but we don't really know why. The Iron Throne situation, as far as like people getting cut and stuff from it, they don't talk about that at all in this book, as far as I can remember. I was told about that from my friends when I was watching House of the Dragon, because that comes up in House of the Dragon. But I'm thinking that's lore that people already know about from Game of Thrones. But then the synopsis of this kind of time, because this is like the first chunk of the book, is that Aegon was a pretty good king, but then his sons sucked. They were really bad at it. Moving on. When Maegor dies, Rhaenys' sons are back at it. I think Maegor maybe didn't have any kids because it's done from there. Or maybe other people were like, let's just go back to the regular line because he was crazy insane. Whatever the case, Aeneas' second son, Jaehaerys, becomes king. And then they have another sibling. This is where it starts to get good, in my opinion. Jaehaerys, and this is just facts, Jaehaerys is in love with his sister. They're big in love, and they're very young. But let me put this up here because he became king. Now, first, he was too young, so they had regents doing it. Nobody could stop them. Alysanne and Jaehaerys couldn't be stopped. They were simply in love. Their mom, who... whatever, she didn't like that they were married because she was more religious, and like the area was getting more religious, and they kind of had outlawed siblings being married. But anyway, they got married in secret, and that was that. Okay, so they get married on Dragonstone because they don't want anyone to know, as I said. They're there for a while until Jaehaerys turns 16. He comes back to be king, and he squelches the rebellion. People really respect him for it. He travels around, he hears complaints, he fixes things, he makes a unified legal system. His sister wife has a lot of kids, okay? She has 13 kids altogether. Jaehaerys is king for 55 years. In the second half of his rule, things kind of went a little topsy-turvy in his personal life. Lots of his kids died. And his relationship with Alysanne becomes really strained, mainly because of the kids dying. Also, then they find out that one of their daughters, Sarah, has been going around the Ton in secret. And I don't know how to say, but she's been like involved with a lot of people. They banish her and she becomes a prostitute. So let me put all these names out here real quick. And I'm going to stop at about 50% of the book where the show starts, pretty much. Okay, so there was a lot of these kids, so I'm going to put them down here. Okay, so these are their kids, right? Beautiful work. Via his oldest son, who knows who he's married to? I mean, I'm sure somebody knows. I don't. He has Rhaenys. So he has Rhaenys, and I've already put it on there because once we hear about her, she's already, well, once she really becomes important, she's already married to Corlys Velaryon. Very important character as well. So here's the deal. This is simply what happens. Balon has a son, Viserys. Okay. So here's what happens. Jaehaerys is king. He's getting really old. His oldest son, Aemon, is crown prince. That's great. Well, guess what? Dead. Oops. So Balon becomes crown prince. People are mad about that because Rhaenys was already born. And wouldn't it be great if Corlys Velaryon was like was like prince consort, whatever, the queen's husband. But no, he's like, no. Balon is going to be the crown prince. Well, guess what? Balon also dies. And then it's a fight to the death between Viserys and Rhaenys. It's actually not, because Jaehaerys is still alive and he's still a king. So he's like, all right, I gotta choose. And he deliberated a little bit about it. Not as long as you might think, but he did deliberate a little bit. And as it happens, Rhaenys actually has a son. She has a son and a daughter. And the Valerians were like a really, really rich and powerful family. Her son Laenor was actually the one who was in line. So it was between Viserys and Laenor, really, but Laenor was really young, so it was pretty much like her and her line. But would you believe, boy, sexism, am I right? But it ends there. And this video ends there too. I will be continuing this on next time. Thanks for watching.